Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode on or video. I don't know why I said episode. Intro's over. Intros screwed. Let's do this again. No. Welcome back to another video on the SciOly Stats YouTube channel, where today I wanted to clarify some things I said in my last video first of all, and say some new things, go over some new things, and then I wanted to make a video about something that I alluded to in my last video. My last video, I said I might make a video about my how I break down the SciOly season. Just so when I say the regionals phase or the states phase, people know what I'm talking about. But before I get into that, there are some things that I wanted to say. So first, I said in my last video that I would not talk about any regional results, and I kind of also broke that promise in my last video, because I mentioned Heritage. I mentioned PA South East regionals where Harriton and Lower Merion competed, and I mentioned how both of them, especially Harriton, did much worse than last year, and that kind of made me realize that to make my rankings as accurate as possible, I will need to incorporate regional results into them. However, I still don't want to talk about specifics for each regional. So how I'm going to reconcile this is that I will talk about regional. I will mention regional results if they are impactful to my rankings. So like I said, Harriton did significantly worse than they did at regionals last year. So I moved them down. I think I had them in 9th or 10th here, and I moved them out of the top 10, just barely though, still in 11th place, still a very good ranking for Harriton, but certainly not as good as they did last season, and not where I had them. But yeah, I still will not show any specific results, so I won't be talking about, all right, Harriton got this score, and they got this place in this event, and that means they're not going to do well at states. Like, if you want to look at all that, you can go on to Duosmium and look at that yourself, because the results are all there. Now, for some state results, we have two pretty big things to talk about here. The first of which is I now have access to the Minnesota state results. So we have a new state to look at here. Again, not too much detail. I just have the team scores here, and then of course the rankings of the top 3 teams. But congratulations to Mounds View for being the Minnesota state champion. And I hope to be seeing you guys at the national competition. Wayzata and Mayo got second and third. As you can see, not too terribly large of a gap. Still a pretty significant margin, though, between Mounds View and their competition here. So again, congratulations, Mounds View, and congratulations to Wayzata and Mayo for placing second and third. The second thing I wanted to say regarding state results is in regards to the Massachusetts state results. I mentioned in my last video that these were preliminary and they were subject to change. And sure enough, they have changed. So these, I believe, are now the official results. So we don't need to worry about too many more changes here. But Acton-Boxborough's score didn't change at all. However, Lexington's score decreased a little bit. It actually decreased by a fairly large amount. I forget what it was before, but it was certainly a lot higher than 79 here. Still a very large gap here. That's more than a 30-point gap. That's 33 points, I think, between Acton-Boxborough and Lexington. Indicates that, again, good job, Lexington. Very reputable, not reputable. What's the word I'm looking for? I want a more sophisticated word than good, but yeah, a very good result for Lexington here at the state competition. And again, congratulations to Acton-Boxborough for being the Massachusetts state champion with an incredible team score of 46. Again, I don't know if I've seen any states that the state champion had a score of 46. So congratulations, Acton-Boxborough. Now let's get into the main portion of the video here. So. Yeah, this is my breakdown of the season. I have the what I'm going to call each of these phases. And then roughly the time of year here, as you can see, once we get down into this section, things start overlapping. I'll explain that in a little bit. And then some just basic characterizations of this. And I should say I most definitely misspelled things in here. Unfortunately, Excel doesn't have a spell check feature. So yeah, and like I said, if you've messaged me about misspellings, I've said that I'm a terrible speller. I consider myself mildly dyslexic. So yeah, just bear with me on the spelling. As long as you know what I'm trying to say, that should be all that matters. Anyway, let's get into this. So the first stage of the Science Olympiad season is what I'm calling the preseason. So the time of year here is during the summer, July to August, maybe even late June. And this is a stage of the season that I would assume most Science Olympiad teams don't really consider or participate in. Because I think at least the non-competitive Science Olympiad teams, I would imagine, don't really consider or participate in this phase of the season, because really this is all about planning. Your team's board of directors is going to start planning out the season. What invitationals are we looking at going to? How do we want to select people to be on our eventual A team? And that stuff. Also, competitors, the event list, of course, should be out by then. Competitors begin looking at what events they'd like to do. And again, if they're really competitive, they would even start studying for some of those events, start planning, how am I going to build this binder? How am I going to build this device? How am I going to organize this note sheet? That sort of thing. So, and coming up with their strategies, maybe even talking to their eventual partners about that. But yeah, a very preliminary phase of the season here, the preseason. So moving on to the early season, this is when many teams start actually, really considering Science Olympiad and really starts participating and picking up some steam. This is some, maybe some what am I trying to say? Maybe some more specific planning goes on here, finalizing overall season plans. But really, this is going to be about event prep. Participants are going to be selecting their events here. And for the most part, those won't usually change throughout the season. Of course, there are exceptions. I should say that there are going to be exceptions to almost everything I say here. So if your team, doesn't exactly follow this format, that's okay, obviously. It's just, how I break things down in my head, and just so you guys know what I'm talking about when I say the early season or the preseason or something like that. Anyway, so this stage is also characterized by very sparse invitationals. Invitational season, of course, picks up in December. Again, that's not to say there aren't any invitationals during this phase. What's that one? Highlands Invitational is in October, I think. Hold on, let me check that. I've been wrong about things before. And yes, October 14th, mid-October. So here we go. So Highlands, of course, is one of the earliest, if not the earliest, invitational. And then, of course, there are other invitationals like DSM, Dick Smith Memorial, here in Pennsylvania, occurs in November, I believe. So, and coaches also begin to draft rosters. So, of course, if you're going to any of these early invitationals, you need rosters for them. I know my team, Cumberland Valley, often unstacks their rosters during this phase of the season, and even into the early invitational phase, they'll unstack their rosters. I think most teams do that as well. SciOly, I think, is the exception. They were extremely good this season from the very first invitationals they attended. That's pretty much it for the early season, I think. Yes, most teams remain unstacked. So, moving on into the invitational phase. So this is where things really start picking up. This is where we get our first indication of what teams are going to be good this season. So this is really when, this is, of course, when I started my YouTube channel, towards kind of towards the beginning of this phase. I marked it as December, really early December. The early season bleeds into a little bit. But yeah, for the most part, December to the end of February is when the Invitational, excuse me, oh man, when the Invitational season occurs. Um, yeah, many invitationals, the vast majority of invitationals take place during this time. Again, of course, you have some really early invitationals and even maybe some late invitationals. Do we have any invitationals from March on here? I don't think so. Now I need to go all the way back up to the top. No, we don't. We have late February is the latest we have an invitational on here. Again, I probably missed some, across the country that happen in March here, but yeah, for the most part, um, the vast majority of invitationals are going to take place during this phase, as indicated by the name. Um, yeah, I wrote sometimes 4+ every weekend. Like early February and late January is really when a lot of invitationals happen. Um, so yeah, some teams begin to stack their rosters. Going into this season, I thought that most teams stacked their rosters during this phase. But I think I was actually wrong after looking at a lot of the, before I started my YouTube channel, that's what I thought. But after, I actually looked at a lot of these competitions and looked at how often I have to super score teams to actually get, a result that can be interpreted as, how good the team is overall. It's a lot more than I expected. So I wrote some teams, not even most teams. I think I'd probably estimate maybe 50 to 60% of teams stack rosters during this time. Maybe a little less than that. I don't really know. But yeah, that's why I wrote some teams and not most teams. And yeah, for certain tournaments as well. So like Harriton's a great example. They unstacked their rosters at Soup, but they went stacked to where is it? MIT here. Yeah, this was definitely a stacked Harriton here. So yeah, some teams will stack their rosters for specific tournaments. Other teams will stack their rosters for every tournament. Some teams don't stack their rosters for any tournament. So yeah, it really depends. You really need to look at the gaps between different rosters and what super scoring, if super scoring would actually improve their score and by how much, to really see if teams went stacked or unstacked. And yeah, this I mentioned at the beginning, how we begin to get a picture of how nationals is going to shape up. So we get our first indications, our first real indications, I should say, of which teams are very competitive this season, which teams aren't as competitive, and yeah, I begin to actually get a good ranking going. Next is the regionals phase. This is the phase that we've just crossed over into. I should explain this now. So I have written here March into early April, and then the states phase says late March into April. So if you'll notice, those cross over a little. So why is that? That's because during these two phases, state science Olympiad organizations, they plan. They vary a lot as to when they hold their regional and state competitions. So some regional competitions take place in February. I think the Southeast regionals actually did take place in late February. But some regional competitions take place in like April, I believe anyway. I'd imagine maybe. And then some state competitions, like we have state results already from some states, from 3 states I have access to the results for. And obviously we're not in late March yet, and we're certainly not in April. So yeah, there's a lot of variability, especially with these two. So that's why these are asterisks here. And then the nationals phase, I'll explain that a little more once I get to it. But yeah, in the regionals phase, obviously most regional competitions, again, most in quotation marks, I guess, regionals competitions happen during this time. I wrote the least competitive teams are eliminated in most regional competitions. If you fall below a certain mark, you don't make it to the state competitions. That might be for all regional competitions, actually. I tend not to make broad general statements like that, but in my mind, that would kind of defeat the purpose of a regional competition if everyone who attended automatically made it to the state competition. I don't know. Maybe that's a thing in like Wyoming or North Dakota or some state that doesn't have a lot of science Olympiad teams. But yeah. And what do I have written here? The vast majority of teams are going. Yeah, so the most teams go stacked to their regional competition. It was really interesting to me. There was one team I found that it looked like didn't, and that was Thomas Jefferson Academy for Science and Technology, or whatever, the Virginia team. Yeah, this one, Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. Um, that's the Virginia State champion, of course. They, I believe, went unstacked to their regional competition, and that was really interesting to me. I never, knew that teams could go or teams went unstacked to their regional competition. So that was kind of cool. Yeah, and that's pretty much all I have to talk about here. Yeah, the big thing here is that um, most regional competitions occur, and the least competitive teams are eliminated very often. Next, we're going into the states phase. So this happens from late March to early to through April. Pretty much to the end of April, I believe. Like Pennsylvania state competition is at the end of April. I think there's some other states that are around that time. Um, so yeah, most state competitions take place during this phase. Duh. Um, other non-competitive teams or teams that are just okay are eliminated. I should clarify what I mean by that. So obviously, states vary a lot based on how competitive they are. I mean, Louisiana isn't going to be as competitive as Ohio or California, right? Um, so a good team in Ohio, like Lexington's a perfect example. If you're from Lexington, I don't mean to keep picking on you or rubbing it in or whatever, but I mean Lexington's a fantastic science Olympiad team. But they're just unfortunate that it's unfortunate that they're in a state with one of the most competitive teams in the country that almost always outperforms them at their state competition, because Massachusetts doesn't have two spots to nationals. That automatically excludes Lexington, unfortunately. So, I mean, yeah, again, I wouldn't classify Lexington as bad or even just okay. They're an amazing Science Olympiad team, but it really does depend on the state here. Um, and yeah, I also wrote this part at the end here. Very competitive teams begin preparing for nationals. So yeah, once your state competition happens and you know you're going to nationals, you automatically start preparing for that if you want to do well at nationals, right? Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say on this phase. Next, we're moving on to the nationals phase. So yeah, again, as the name suggests, this phase ends with, of course, the national competition in mid to late May. And of course, that brings an end to the whole official season. I have one more phase here that I want to talk about, just so the whole year is covered here. But yeah, let's talk about the nationals phase. So yeah, most teams are eliminated at this point, right? Even even some very competitive teams that just got unlucky at their state competition are eliminated. So only the most competitive remain. Again, kind of an asterisk on that. If we actually took all of the most competitive teams in the country and sent them to a different nationals competition, that would include Lexington and all three good Pennsylvania teams, Cumberland Valley, Lower Merion, and Harriton. And it would exclude, a lot of the less competitive states like Wyoming and Louisiana and Arkansas. I just want to make sure I'm not making stuff up here. Arkansas, Louisiana, Wyoming's not too far behind. So yeah, it would exclude a lot of those these bottom states here. But then other schools from other states, like maybe even Centerville would make it then from Ohio. That would be fantastic to see them compete at a national competition. But yeah, a little unfortunate for those teams. But anyway, yeah, so the teams that have made it from their state competition to nationals will often begin prepping for nationals. And yeah, like I said, the phase ends with the national competition. So pretty self-explanatory there. And finally, we move on to the postseason. So a lot of people consider the season over once nationals ends. And I mean, yeah, the competitive portion of the season, I guess you could. Oh, whoops. I guess you could say maybe this portion is the competitive portion of the season. Um, in fact, I think I'll call it that. We'll highlight that uh, competitive portion. I'll call it the competitive season. There we go. Again, if I apologize if I misspelled anything there. I'm pretty sure season spelled correctly though. And then like the postseason and the preseason, I'll call the off season. How about that? And then the early season, again, I don't want to group it in with the. Oh, whoops! I made this a different color for some reason. I don't know why I did that. The early season, I don't want to group this in with the competitive season because really a lot of tournaments that happen here. Not saying they're not competitive, but a lot of teams aren't stacking. Some of the most competitive teams don't attend a tournament until like February. So I hesitate to call this a competitive part of the season. If you disagree with me, though, that's okay. But yeah, the postseason. So yeah, a lot of people again consider the season over once nationals ends. I do not. Again, just because I wanted the whole year covered here. What characterizes this portion of the season is just reflection on the season. How did things go? How could we have done better? If we didn't make it to nationals this year, but we were super close, how are we going to do that next year? Or if we didn't make it to states this year, how are we going to do that next year? Looking at how you can improve going into the next season, and then looking forward to the next season. Maybe even some early plans, or people start to, because the event list is often out at this point, maybe people start looking at what events they want to do, and maybe a little bit of that preseason stuff I mentioned earlier. But yeah, and then that brings us full circle. So June, that often ends in June, and we're back in the preseason with July. So yeah, that is pretty much it for this video. Again, as I mentioned in my last video, I'm not really sure when I'll be uploading again. I think I'll wait until we have a decent few, because we're going to get other state results, as the days go by here. I'll wait until a decent few states have their results out. I'm not going to make a whole video about, the Michigan state results, or maybe I'll make a whole video about like Pennsylvania or California or something like that. But yeah, I'm not going to make a whole video about just one state. Yeah, so I'll wait until some more state results come out to make another video. I don't know when that'll be, so it could be a couple weeks before you hear from me again. Yeah, that'll do it for this video. So thank you very much for watching, and have a fantastic day.